Welcome. Thank you for finding your way here. This is a place for anyone who needs a moment of solace. A place to just listen, relax, and let your world slow down for a bit. Settle in with me as we continue our journey through Pale Lights, Book 1, Lost Things by ErraticErrata. Chapter 5. Tristan needed a way in. The infant zones had claimed a corner of the hold and were entertaining the sole foreigner they'd decided was worth their time, mere feet away, but far beyond his reach. The thief did have to admit the Milani they'd picked was a fearsome specimen, with 2 inches of height on him and a build hinting she could handle that saber she was dragging around. Unlike the noblewoman, he was unlikely to get invited for refreshments. However, so he'd have to find another angle. Fortunately, one was there for the taking. The Infantzones had brought attendants with them, 6 people in all, and 1 would be his key. The soldiers, as soldiers did, went to dice the moment their masters ceased paying attention. Even the grim-faced Milani huntsman in Villazur service went, joining a tall man in Ruesta colors, the man Tristan would kill before this was all over, Cosmea Floor. Thrice accursed, and may the freaking devils of Pandemonium eat him whole. There had already been a game going near the massive crates in the back of the hold, so, after the soldiers joined, Tristan simply did the same. The welcome was lukewarm until he flashed some coppers, which were in short supply. Most were playing for buttons or trinkets. "We're playing Augur," a dark-haired woman enthusiastically told him. "No matches, Sacramonte rules." "Which are nonsense," a scarred Milani complained. "Why would the lover's star make you lose?" Considering most of the circle were Sacramontans, she won herself a few unfriendly stares with that. "We call them the rat's eyes," Cosme smiled, stroking his beard. "He is not a god whose attentions are kind." Tristan smirked. It was an old legend that the Rat King had been but a pack of rats once, but that they had devoured one of the mains. Those great, pristine gods, so beloved of the Infantzones, had become a deity even those old things feared. There were 1,000 gods worshipped and bargained with in the mud of the murk, but few as beloved as the Rat King. He was as a patron to the lost and beggared, those who dwelled in shadow and filth. Not the kind of god that would look well upon the likes of Cosmea Floor. "It's the usual way," the same dark-haired woman insisted. "Play or leave." The grizzled Milani sighed, but picked up the dice, dropping them in a wooden cup before shaking it. Tristan had played Augur before. It was the simplest of dicing games, and so he was not afraid of losing too badly. He was not here to win anyhow. Betting low, he made sure to stay in the game as the dicers began to chat. The pushy, dark-haired one, who lit up at the sight of his coppers, was called Ines, and now he recognized her from earlier. She was the woman married to the dust addict. Said man was napping, which spared him the sight of his wife losing badly at Augur. Gods, but Tristan had never seen someone so genuinely terrible at a game of chance. He was grateful for it, as her emptying pile of buttons loosened tongues. Winning always puts folk in a fine mood. Information slowly trickled in. A huntsman that came with the Villazur was named Sanule, though he spoke little save when the other Milani addressed him in some foreign tongue. Tristan knew a little Umoya, but whatever they spoke only seemed to have so much in common with the best-known tongue of the Isles. Inyani, The older woman with the scars, who'd complained about the rules earlier, was a great deal chattier and everyone's shared Antigua. The thief asked casually about the other two Milani she'd come with earlier in the day, soon surprised at easily getting an answer he'd figured he would have to finesse out. "The boy's my nephew," Yanni said. "I'm coming along to keep an eye on him." "Family is the most important thing," Ines agreed. The man in Ruesta colors rolled his eyes at them. This one was called Ricardo, and though he was not as large as the Atlan leg breaker, it was a close thing. Closely shaved, he had the kind of well-proportioned face that Tristan knew was considered handsome. He was also, to put it in a single word, a shit. "Woman's talk," Ricardo mocked, before pushing a copper on a bet below 4. Ines bet 2 buttons on above 9. Solid odds she had somehow already lost thrice on. "There's no need for rudeness," Cosme drawled, pushing his own bet on 8 precise. He liked to look like a good man, Cosme aflore. Tristan had been young, but he remembered that much. The others on the list had been demanding, often rude, but Cosme had always been kind with his father. Told him with a smile that it would be over soon, that he just needed to get through it. He still had that same smile on his face when pulling the trigger. The thief's gaze must have lingered, for the bearded man glanced at him curiously. There was not a speck of recognition on Cosme's face. Not that he had expected one. He'd been but a child when they last met. Tristan smiled, bearing his hatred deep. "What is it like working for infant zones?" the thief asked, feigning fascination. Cosme did not hide his smugness. "Exhausting, but rewarding in its own way," he claimed. "Though in truth, I serve not the brothers, but one of their uncles, so they must listen to me in all things." Tristan doubted that very much, but nodded as if admiring. Ricardo, who'd been listening to them, laughed. "The perks are shit when working for the Serdan," the man said. "Now me? I get to look over Lady Isabel and her pretty little maids. There's a real prize." It was not the first time tonight he mentioned the maids, which he seemed to be laying claim on to an entirely disinterested audience. The huntsman, Sanole, eyed the other man, then muttered something to the other Milani. Tristan smothered a smile when he recognized the words in Umoya, which translated to something like crow meat. A grinning Inyani rolled the dice, a 3 and 5. Ines cursed disbelievingly, Cosme smirking as he claimed the pot. Ricardo looked none too pleased at having lost, his coppers thinning. "We ought to get the valet in here," the big man said. "Go get him, Cosme." "Gascon attending to the brothers is why I can sit here in peace," the bearded man replied, shaking his head. "Besides, he's not as bad with money as you think." And like that, Tristan had what he wanted. Names and faces for all 6 attendants. Ricardo seemed like the kind of man that would be easy to get talking when plied with liquor and flattery, but entirely too unreliable to be used. Neither Sinale nor Cosme could be his key either. The Milani was quiet and distant, while Tristan was not sure how well he'd be able to hide his hatred if he spent too long around the other man. That left the personal servants. Since the Serdan valet was even now polishing the boots of the brothers, Tristan's gaze moved to the Ruesta handmaids. It'd have to be one of them. Now, he just needed to get rid of one last problem. "4 rabbits on below 5, Fortuna demanded in his ear, draped over his shoulder. "This one's a win. I can feel it in my bones." Tristan grimaced. He could not risk even a whisper, not so close to so many people. Irksome when he was itching to point that she did not, in fact, have bones. Come on, Fortuna insisted. When have I ever steered you wrong? Every single time he'd gambled, he silently replied. He put 2 coppers on 6 exact instead. Wait, no, you're right, she muttered. This is better. All in, Tristan. Bet everything. Fortuna, as befitting of the Lady of Long Odds, only had 2 stratagems in games of chance: doubling down or going all in. He ignored her, which proved warranted when a moment later 2 5s were rolled and he lost his coppers. He then used the loss as a pretext for retreat, forcing himself to ignore Fortuna's indignant howling. We had them, Tristan, the goddess bellowed. Our luck was turning around. I'm sure of it. We just needed to keep at it a little longer. Abuela had taught him that gods always craved something. It was in their nature. They were aether given face through mankind's touch, leaving them with hungers that they could only satisfy through men. It was what gods got from contracts, a way to sate those hungers, the same reason that if he listened to Fortuna, he would bet on bad dice until he was destitute. It was that 1 in 100,000 victory she craved. Long odds come true. To her, losing 1,000 times for that single unlikely win would be nothing more than suffering through overcooked greens to get at a juicy side of pork. We'll try again later, Tristan murmured, pretending to be brushing his knee so he could hide his mouth. You always say that, Fortuna pouted, but then we never do. She was pouting, so the storm had passed. She'd stay snippy about it for a bit, then, before the turn of the hour, entirely forget. With that seen to, he turned his attention back to the handmaids. Both were near their mistress, who was playing at court with the other nobles and ignoring them so long as she did not need anything fetched. One, a short, dark-haired woman whose name he had learned was Beatrice, was finishing up mending a coat with needle and thread. The other, a redhead whose name was ErraticErrata, information obtained through Ricardo's boasting he would get her in bed, was paging through a book with a bored look. Tristan got closer, but not enough to earn more than an indifferent glance from either, waiting for an opportunity. It came when Beatrice began to put away her needle in a neat box. Sight he answered by immediately borrowing luck. The ticking began in the back of his mind. Clocks moving gears, and a heartbeat later, the box slipped through the maid's hands. Needles and threads spilled all over the floor, the woman letting out a horrified gasp. Even as he rose to help her, Tristan released the luck he'd borrowed. Fortune snapped back, lightly so for the lightness of what he'd taken, but it returned with unerring aim. A wooden bobbin rolled under his foot, and he slipped with a startled yelp, falling forward. Tristan landed on his knees, only a hand keeping his face off the bottom of the hold, and did his best to ignore Fortuna's hysterical laughter. Sweet mains, are you all right? Sighing, the thief looked up at Beatrice's face. She was trying to hide her amusement, but failing, and dragged himself back up. Nothing was wounded, save my pride, he wryly replied. Would you like a hand? That is kind of you to offer, the maid said, sounding surprised. It would be appreciated. Threads had rolled away in every direction, and needles were hard to pick out in the gloom of the hold, so it was genuine work to get them back. The other maid ignored them as they scuttled about at first, until finally she closed her book with a loud sigh and got up. Brushing back red curls, she bent and picked up a single bobbin of blue thread as Beatrice was reaching out for it. It was dropped into the box almost contemptuously before Brasiera turned a sneer on the both of them. Careful the vagrant doesn't pocket some of Lady Isabel's things, Beatrice, the redhead said. Then her lips quirked cruelly. Though maybe he'll cut you in so you can finally afford a decent dress. I'll take responsibility if there is a mishap, Brasiera, Beatrice curtly replied. Drop things less then, Brasiera advised. Your breeding is showing. And on that parting shot, she flounced away, leaving dark-haired Beatrice struggling not to look furious. It passed after a moment, and the maid turned an apologetic look on the thief. I'm sorry, she said. What for? Kristen snorted. She seems a horrid bitch. A gamble, but he liked his odds. Beatrice's mouth closed, but she was not quite able to silence the laugh startling its way out of her throat. Under Tristan's smiling gaze, the maid convulsed a few times, then erupted into giggles. She really is, Beatrice admitted. You would think she were a king's daughter instead of a Drapier's. Ah, Tristan thought. So it was like that. Drapiers were wealthy men, and the pressing reason one's daughter would be serving as handmaid to a lady was so she might use that foothold in noble circles to marry up. Meaning, Brasiera was a maid only until she found better, while Beatrice would be servant for life. Their status and treatment would be starkly different. Good for him, though. An enemy, especially a common one, would make it easier to forge ties. My sympathies, the thief told her, finding he meant it. The dark-eyed maid looked up at him for a moment, then hummed. Bringing her hand to the side of her dress as if to straighten it, she discreetly curled her fore and middle fingers. The thief hid his surprise at the sight of the mark of the rat being made, pretending to scratch at his sideburns while returning it. Beatrice smiled. I had a feeling you might be, she said. Born in Feria, he told her. Feria district was of the nicer parts of the Merc. He'd not stay there. Without his father, there had been no affording the rents set up by the Sertan. But telling Beatrice he'd cut his teeth in rougher places like Araturo and Caira would do him no favors. The dark-haired maid's smile grew more genuine. I am as well, she told him. The north end, near Araturo. East for me, around Weepers Avenue, he shared. She looked impressed, though she should not have been. Before they prettied it up, he clarified. These last few years, the noble house of Serdan had cleaned up some of the many streets they owned in Feria. Mostly so they could raise the rents, throwing out the old tenants and replacing them with wealthier migrants that couldn't find rooms in the ever-crowded quays. A lucrative racket, by all reports. Figures, Beatrice dryly said, eyeing him up and down. He grinned back. Tristan was cleaner than most, for a dirty thief would not be allowed into anywhere worth robbing, but he still had filth under his fingernails. He'd not bathed in a few days, even if his clothes were clean. Not so for the maid, who even smelled faintly of lilac. Before he could tease her about that, an interruption bowled them over. Lady Isabel Ruesto was barely taller than Beatrice, and just as dark-haired, but she was hard to mistake for the other. The Infanzon had an indolence about her, particular to those that never done a day's work in their life. It was lovely of you to help Beatrice, Ruesta told him, smiling and laying a hand on his wrist.
May I have your name, sir?
It was an effort not to allow distaste to show on his face. Tristan, the thief smiled back. It is my honor to meet you, Lady Ruesta. The infantson tittered.
Call me Lady Isabel, she insisted. It is the least I can do for someone who so gallantly helped my maid.
He shot Beatrice a look of condescending fondness.
She is not usually so clumsy, I swear to you.
Beatrice bent her head before her mistress, murmuring apologies that were airily dismissed. Practice kept Tristan's smile from growing visibly stiff. It must be the ship, the thief said. Journeys have their difficulties. The noble brat nodded.
Too true, she said, smile brightening. Yet they are so very exciting.
She patted his arm again.
I do hope to see more of you, Tristan, the Ruesta said. We shall talk again.
She flounced off as suddenly as she had flounced in, returning to her nest of nobles. The gray-eyed thief waited until she was settled, turned to Beatrice, and rolled his eyes. Would it be rude, he said, to offer my sympathies twice? The dark-haired maid blinked, then turned an intense gaze on him. No, she said slowly. But you mean... Beatrice hesitated. Did you not find her charming? The opposite, Tristan frankly replied. Beatrice's face twisted in surprise, to his own. She bit her lip. Forgive me for the indiscretion, the maid said, but are you perhaps... She gestured vaguely, but the meaning itself was clear enough. It was not particularly polite to ask strangers if they were homosexual. However, he cocked an eyebrow. Why would that matter? Beatrice bit her lip again, then leaned closer. She has a contract, the dark-eyed maid whispered. I don't know the terms, but it seems to charm people, only those that are attracted to her, though, at least I think. The thief felt sick at the realization that the freaking Intenzon had been turning a contract on him the entire time she was pretending to play nice, jaws clenching. It couldn't give her too much control over others, he knew, else she would be in breach of the Iscariot Accords, and the Watch would have purged the entire Ruesta family. Yet the thought that she had been seeking to influence his mind was still nauseating. He hid his anger, lest someone notice it, but there had been no avoiding the maid's eyes. It'd be safer to concede an answer to keep her on side, he decided. I do not deal in attraction, Tristan told her. Not physical, at least. Asexual? Beatrice asked. He shrugged. The thief had never much cared to put a name to his inclinations, or lack thereof, but he supposed it fit well enough. He'd caught feelings once or twice over the years, but it had not changed his distaste for sex. For all that he'd remained vague, Beatrice significantly warmed to him after. Was she truly so desperate for company that would not be charmed by her despicable mistress? It must be so, for as the two of them sat near the noble's traveling trunks, the dark-haired woman gossiped away at him with great eagerness. Tristan swallowed a smile of triumph when the talk turned to the Inthenzones. She's been stringing along the Cerdan brothers for about a year now, Beatrice noted, making them fight for her attention, knowing they want her hand in marriage to settle their inheritance dispute. The brothers are at odds? Tristan casually asked. Hate each other, more like, Beatrice snorted. The only reason they're taking the trials is to chase Lady Isabel. If it weren't for Cosme of Flora coming along to keep them in line,
I'd be worried about them trying to bump each other off. He was boasting about them having to listen to him earlier, the thief shared. He's full of shit, the maid replied. I talked with the maids of a Cerdan cousin when Lady Isabel last called on Lord Augusto, and they told me word in the house is that he's being sent as punishment. He used to be in high favor, but botched some kind of affair with House Ragosa. He's here to make sure they both come back, Tristan surmised. The poor bastard, Beatrice agreed. It's cruel to play with them so, but I can understand why the lady doesn't want to marry them. Raymond was a real bastard, even before he got his contract, but the talk since he got it is worse. He cocked his head to the side. Apparently, he trains using it on servants, she murmured. Some sort of light he can make shackles with, but it burns the skin. One showed me marks. How was it, Tristan wondered, that even knowing they were monstrous, he was still angered at hearing of the petty cruelty of the Cerdans? And the elder brothers as bad? He asked. I still have family in Feria, Beatrice said, and they passed on rumors. He was placed in charge of the Cerdan properties there a few years back, rents and such, and he's got a reputation. The implication there was an ugly one. Tristan wished it was the first time he had heard it spoken, or that it had even slightest chance of being the last. How bad? It's said he doesn't force the girls into bed, the maid admitted, but he'll hold off on collecting a debt or a rent if he's kept company. Kept company. What a gentle way to put it. They were both children of the Merc, so they knew well that in life, some choices were not really choices at all. Pieces of work, Tristan said, the hatred in his voice old and lovingly tended to. I'm almost rooting for Resta to make them bear knives. She won't, Beatrice said, shaking her head. For the same reason I know she won't marry either. She's keeping her reputation pristine so she can get the husband she does want. An older cousin on her mother's side from a branch of the Livares. Tristan's brow rose. The House of Livares was one of the founding families of Sacramonte. Isabel Ruesta did not lack for ambition to seek marriage into even one of the lesser branches. You'll need more than contract to win that, he opened. Beatrice nodded. It's why she decided to take the trials, the maid said. The cousin is taking them as well, gone over on the first ship. They'll be pursuing him throughout the whole mess. While playing with their Cerdans like the whole time, Tristan muttered. Infant zones. Like it won't be dangerous enough already. She'll pick up a few others to toy with, Beatrice predicted. Already, she's sunk her hooks into that poor Milani girl. The one with the saber? That's the one. Some kind of fallen noble from the Isles, I think. Maid shrugged. Already smitten and getting used to prick the brothers. At least she looks like she can handle a blade, Tristan said. Another sword arm can't hurt on the dominion of lost things. I suppose, she doubtfully replied. Though I expect you'd be safer than most without, the thief said, tone carefully idle. I'd be surprised if the infant zones hadn't made a pact to share their soldiers. He hoped not, for it would complicate getting at Cosme and the Cerdans. But that was not the way of the world. Nobles always closed rank, hid each other's vileness. All but Lady Villazur, Beatrice absent-mindedly confirmed. She's been putting off answering, but safety is a relative thing. The dark-haired maid turned an anxious but hopeful look on him. Tristan had been asked enough favors by the more desperate than he to recognize when someone was about to do it. I saw you dicing earlier, Beatrice said. Did you perhaps chat with a man named Ricardo? The large Ruesta soldier, Tristan thought. The same who had been warning everyone off Lady Isabel's two maids since he had a claim on them. You came up, the thief said, not beating around the bush. He seemed very certain his advances would be accepted. I'm worried, the dark-eyed maid quietly said, that he's certain because he won't care if I am accepting. Tristan stilled. You are a lady's handmaid, he slowly said. I'm not a drapier's daughter, Tristan, Beatrice tiredly replied. He wouldn't dare on Ruesta grounds, but out here, I'm just some girl plucked out of the murk because I resembled Lady Isabel when we were children. So long as he does it out of sight. She must have been a body double as well as a handmaid, he thought. Only now Beatrice was shorter and broader than Isabel Ruesta. So her value had taken a sharp dive. The two resembled each other no more than any other pair of dark-haired women close in age. So you're looking to make friends, he said. I can be useful to you too, Beatrice firmly retorted. I already proved it with all the things I've been telling you, haven't I? Besides, I'm a way for you to get in with their group. That's exactly why you've been sniffing around. He eyed the maid, a smile tugging at his lips unbidden. A proper rat you are, Tristan praised. Name your terms. She straightened her back. Keep an eye out for me when he's prowling, the maid said. If I'm sent out alone, make an excuse to follow. I don't expect you to win a fight against a soldier, but if you can just delay him long enough, I can run. Then she could get back to the others and make a ruckus. Lady Isabel would have to act if confronted with such a situation, else she would lose all honor and her reputation would be ruined. Who would serve a noble that did not protect her own handmaids? Still, more likely, Beatrice was betting on Ricardo not being willing to take the risk of trying anything if there was a witness, given the consequences of getting caught. A practical solution. Only he needed a little more from her. I've made another friend, Tristan said. A former soldier. I want him to be invited as well. The maid hesitated. It's to your advantage as well, he pressed. Two of us, watching out for you. One more pair of hands if Ricardo tries his luck. And a pair trained in fighting at that. Promise of someone that might be able to handle the large Ruesta soldier in a fight was what tipped the decision, Tristan decided as he watched her. The dark-haired maid nodded, first with hesitation, but then briskly the second time. They'll start looking around for people to grow their numbers tomorrow, Beatrice said. I attended to Lady Isabel this morning while they discussed it. I'll make sure you and your friend get in. Then we have a bargain, Tristan replied. On my oath, may 100 gods bite me should I break it. Beatrice returned the promise in kind. It was said that in ancient times the great sages of Liergan had known how to make such oaths binding, but even if the tale was true, the words had long outlived learning. Now it was simply ceremony. Before they parted ways, Tristan lightly laid a hand on her arm to stop her. I have a wonder, he said. Yes? If a great misfortune was to strike Ricardo, Tristan asked with the softness of a feather, would you then also consider our bargain upheld? Beatrice breathed in sharply, dark eyes searching his face. She hesitated for a long moment, only for her back to straighten again. The hungry bite, the beggared snatch, she softly quoted back.
cornered fight, Tristan finished. So went the law of rats, and though they might have left the Merc had not left them. She did not need to speak the word for him to hear the agreement. Nodding his understanding, he bade her a silent farewell. Closing his eyes as he listened to her footsteps moving away, Tristan made himself go over the conversation again. He had made no obvious mistakes, or betrayed his interest in seeing half the infant zones aboard dead, he decided. Victory, then, however uneasy it made him. He would have to ponder a way to get rid of Ricardo, if the opportunity came. Pact between the nobles to share their soldiers meant killing the man would be useful anyhow. Now, only needed to sell the bargain he'd struck to Yong, whose behalf he had also bargained. He did not anticipate conflict there. The soldier had plainly told him he sought only to get to the third trial, nothing else mattering to him. Using the infant zones for safety, at least for a time, would be a boon. The Tianchi was laying slumped in a corner and reeking of booze when Tristan found him. But his eyes were open. He was studying the lay of the hold. Alliances are forming, Yang said, tone slurring. Look. The thief sat before, following the pointed finger, wrinkling his nose at the smell of liquor. His ally, however drunk, was correct. Groups were forming. The first around that disturbingly perfect-looking Atzlan that came recommended. A large leg breaker from the Menor Mano was sitting with him, as was the pair from Asphodel, both the young noble with acne and the gaunt, exhausted man Tristan had been warned about. Leander Galatas, here on recommendation by the Navigators Guild, might hold knowledge of signs. The twins were eyeing them up as well, visibly considering tying themselves to that crew even as they spoke with the Atzlan woman he knew nothing about. On the opposite end of the hold, another alliance was coming together, looking a lot more convivial. The two younger Milani that Inyani was keeping an eye on were chatting with the pair of Ramayans that had also come together. A lot of them all close in age and well-dressed. Inyoni's nephew looked nervous, always looking around as if expecting to be jumped, but all four were armed, and even the chubby-cheeked Ramayan boy looked like he knew how to handle his pistol. With a veteran like Inyoni behind them, they would be a crew to reckon with. Three forces, Tristan mused. The infant zones and their attendants, Tupac Sickle with his recruits, and this band of 5. The rest, he suspected, would be leftovers. The oldest two on the boat were seated close, but not talking. No one had approached them. Meanwhile, the married couple was arguing in a low voice, and Marzella? Where was Marzella? Probably hiding in some corner. Looking for Brunn, Tristan was unsurprised to see the man Fortuna had warned him about landing on his feet. He was chatting with a flattered-looking Brisieda, not a trace of sneer on the redhead maid's face. That left only the Braseni, whose name he had never learned, and the well-armed Tianchi, recommended by the rookery. The two of them talking when he glanced their way. The conversation soon ended, though, and they went different ways. "Did you get anything out of the maid?" Yang asked. "A bargain," Tristan murmured. "We watch her back against the Ruesta guard. She gets us in with the infant zones." The Tianchi soldier let out a whistle that was a little too loud, drawing eyes to them. Tristan pushed down a squirm of discomfort. "Good work," Yang praised. "I was thinking we'd have to work our way in with Tupac's crew."
The nobles are a better horse to ride. He approached you? Tristan asked. Came around, the drunk said, but he's gathering killers, and I don't want to be one of them unless I know why. The thief grunted in agreement. He's not the only one that got curious, Yong continued. The Rasseni's been keeping an eye on you all afternoon. Tristan forced himself not to look at her and gave the game away. She speak to anyone so far? That Tianxi girl that walks like she's done Republic drills, the soldier began to list. Brun, that terrified girl you rubbed elbows with. Oh, and the Ramayan gunslinger, but only before the pair started cozying up with the Milani. Looking for allies. If so, she was not doing well. The thief glanced her way and found she was standing alone. It was hard to tell anything about her, given the way Rossini dressed whenever they left their city-state. The woman wore a gray dress that went down to knee-high boots, embroidered leather gloves, and layered gray veils that reached halfway down her torso and were kept in place by a painted wooden circle atop her head. The only opening was for the eyes, a dull copper mask carefully worn there to keep everything covered except the eye holes. It was said the folk of Rasun thought their island the only untainted land in all of Vesper, hiding their bodies outside it so they would not lead evil back to their home. All Tristan could tell about the Rossini was that she was about of height with him, tall for a woman, and that those gloves and boots were worn from use. The boots in particular were... Thief stilled. Young, he murmured. Look at the Rossini's boots. They do look comfortable, the Tianxi agreeably replied. What colors would you say the stitches are? The soldier shot him a strange look. Dark blue? He finally said, shrugging. So they were. Tristan had not met many Rossini, but back when he'd run messages for a Roja frontman near the docks, he learned a few things about them, like the way they never wore anything blue below the belt, since it drew the attention of evil gods. There was no way a Rossini, religious enough to observe full veiling, would not know that. Which means I'm not looking at a Rossini. Pitching himself up, the thief brushed his trousers clean before walking away from a baffled Yong. Unhurried, Tristan crossed the hold until he reached the false Rossini and leaned against the wall to her left. I do not believe, the stranger said, that we have been introduced. No accent. Her Antigua had that cadence to it common to those who'd learned the language late, but nothing about the way she spoke hinted about where she was from. It was, he mused, an aggressively unaccented way of speaking, and so almost certainly practiced. He didn't immediately reply, instead leaning his head back against the wall. When he finally spoke, his tone was barely above a whisper. I am trying to think, the thief said, of a reason for why you'd pick Rasen of all places as way to hide your identity. I can't seem to find one. He looked up at the ceiling, the play of shadows lined by the lantern lights. In old Saraya, masks are worn by certain trades, he said. Surely hair dye would have been easier than going around in a full Rossini veiling if you only sought to hide your identity. Are you accusing me of something? You're wearing blue under the belt, Tristan plainly said. Rossini do not. Not unless we have been exiled, she replied.
A tense moment passed. Did you think I'd buy that? He curiously asked. A sigh, then she shuffled on her feet. I should have sprung for the boots without stitches, she muttered. He hummed. Her eyes were blue. He glimpsed through the slits of the copper mask. You're not going to introduce yourself? He asked. You've kept an eye on me all day, the thief said. You already know my name. A guess, but one he liked his odds on. She did not deny it. So the Tianxi's your ally, the stranger said. Thought as much. You had to be looking close to notice that, he said. What is it that you've been looking at us for? Haven't decided yet, she lightly replied. Besides, that's ahead of us. Here and now, I would like to offer you a deal. He cocked his head to the side. Your silence, the veiled woman offered, for knowledge that might save your life. Kristen eyed her searchingly, but there was no face to read, only dull copper and cloth. Might end up useful leverage to out her as an imposter, he considered, but it was not certain. Most here did not have a reason to care. Better to get something certain than hold on to something he might never use. And if she told him something useless, then he would still have learned something, only about her. Agreed, he replied. The noblewoman, picked up by the infant zones, the stranger said, has 10 silver lines tattooed on her left arm. So she's a Malani swords mistress, Tristan frowned. They were dangerous folk, he'd heard, feared even by the bloodthirsty champions of Aztlan warrior societies. No, the woman said, it's on the wrong arm, in the wrong color. She's a Periduri mirror dancer. Wasn't Peridur part of the kingdom of Milan, one of the islands? There's a difference, I take it, the thief said. Swords masters gain their lines in honor duels, bloody fights, but deaths aren't common. On the High Isle, to win a line, you're taken to the shore on a specific day of the year. To duel? In a manner of speaking, she said. There's a kind of lemure. They're called gray mirrors. They prey on lone travelers and fishermen, taking their form and then eating the body to gain some of its memories. Tristan's disbelieving gaze, against his will, went to the noblewoman they were talking about. Blissfully unaware of the attention, he was telling a story to the villager. You can't be serious. They wait until the mirror takes the form of the one trying for the line, the stranger evenly said, then toss it a sword of its own, for fairness. They win or die, facing themselves year after year. If the Periduri only takes such a trial once a year, and she had 10 stripes, she must have begun when she was a child. 10? 11? Young. Don't ever face that woman sword in hand, the stranger warned, unless you are looking to die. That was knowledge well worth a secret kept. Tristan did not hide his appreciation. He'd come out ahead in this bargain, perhaps even a little too much. Best to even the scales, lest he be in the stranger's debt. The Resta girl has a contract that charms others, he murmured, though there are restrictions. The veiled woman stayed silent for a moment. That, she finally said, could be trouble. It was obvious enough he did not bother to voice agreement. Besides, he got what he came here for, and more. It was time to take his leave. Since you have my name, Tristan said,
It would only be fair for me to receive yours. She shot him a considering look, as if debating what she would use. Sarai. It's been worthwhile, Sarai, he said, inclining his head. So it has, she agreed. We'll speak again on the island. Surprisingly, he found himself looking forward to it. He'd barely taken a step away from the veiled woman when he heard a gunshot. Body tensing as he went for his knife, he realized, a moment later, that it had come from the decks above, although he'd not been the only one alarmed. There were several others on their feet, and just as wary. A second later, another shot sounded. Then, what had to be a dozen more. They did not stop. "We're under attack!" Cosme of Floor shouted. "Arm yourselves!" Pirates? Surely not, for what kind of fool would attack a watch ship when they carried few goods and were certain to be full of soldiers? Even as the travelers of the hold went for their weapons, Tristan's gaze swept through them again as instinct had him counting the heads. Shit, the thief thought. Mardzella was still missing. The same terrified girl he was certain had been drawing on her contract compulsively since coming on board. Sinking feeling in his stomach, Tristan brushed past the pair of Ramayans and climbed atop one of the crates in the back. He heard a man's voice laughing, asking if he was going to hide, but he ignored it as he crawled forward. The back of the hold was a tightly packed mass of crates, but over one's edge, Tristan saw some sort of cloth peeking out. Pressing again, he crawled closer, seeing then it was not cloth at all. It was some sort of webbing, like a spider's. Behind that crate, nesting among threads of webbing, was horror. What had been Mardzella barely clung on to human shape, milky blind eyes having grown all over her head, while spindly legs ending in claws had ripped their way out of her sides and torso. She'd held herself in her own arms, the skin webbed together, and when a noise of terrified disgust ripped its way out of Tristan's throat, she suddenly twitched. She's waking up. Milky eyes swam into focus, and the thief threw himself back. "Saint!" he shouted. "Saint in the hold!" He didn't even see what hit him. Keening sound filling his ears as pain exploded across his back, and he tumbled through a broken crate. Budge, his shoulder. Tristan rose out of a spill of speeds just in time to see the Saint scuttling through the hold, while half a dozen people fired at it, carelessly slapping down the Atzlan leg breaker when it stood in her way. The god wearing Mardzella let out a moaning sound when shots tore at its flesh, but it would take more than musket balls to put it down. Not that it seemed inclined to stay at the bottom of the ship. Bleeding black ichor, the monster climbed up the wall to the ceiling and ripped its way clean through the wood. "Oh, spirits," someone moaned. Even as it climbed through the hole, the Saint let out another keening moan before disappearing. A moment later, Tristan got a glimpse of what the Black Cloaks had been shooting at all this time. Mantics. Of all the bloody things, it was mantics. Leering creatures barely 2 feet long, dragging themselves on long, clawed hands as their disturbingly human faces bared fangs. Only the scavengers were gone wild, spilling down into the hold by the dozens and savagely going for those closest to them. Tristan backed away from the mess, watching as Tupac Sickle calmly finished putting together a spear and harpooned the closest Larrys without batting an eye. Violence broke the spell of surprise, the rest of the hold exploding into action. Keeping an eye on the infant zones,
Tristan saw that they were already moving towards the upper deck, looking to the black cloaks to save their necks, no doubt. But they were leaving fighters behind, only Cosme heading up with them, and the cold place in the back of his mind saw the opening. The mirror dancer was sticking close to Isabel Ruesta. Since the infant zones were sharing soldiers, that meant... The thief moved towards his medicine cabinet. While mantics kept slithering down and fighting sounded above, he discreetly grabbed a small vial from the upper right compartment and felt out the lining of the door. There were long needles, just like he learned in Alvareno's dosages, and he palmed one. A look told him that Beatrice was on her way up with her mistress, and that Yong was fine. Though visibly drunk, he was reloading his pistol without fumbling, so there was no need to stick his head out. Better to wait for his moment, and until then, take the opportunity he'd been handed. That crone Salipa had promised to see him beaten if he got into the crates, but now one was open, and no one likely to be paying attention if he had a look at what was inside the others. Even as he uncorked the vial he'd taken and dipped the needle in the brown, viscous spinster's milk within, he snuck into the back of the hold. The vial was tucked away carefully, as was the needle, and he turned his attention to the mystery. He'd been thrown into seeds earlier. But prying open other crates showed him the rest of the goods. At least 2 full of muskets, powder, and swords. Another of trinkets, but there was a lot of food. Some were military rations, but also dried meats, and a large amount of those cheap seeds, the kind that didn't come from glare crops, so ended up used only to feed poor men and darklings. What does the watch garrison on the island need with so much food? Something to keep in mind, though he best end this before he was caught. Leaving the cover of the crates, Tristan returned to find the tail end of a fight. Most of the travelers had gone up, like the infant zones, leaving only a handful behind to hold the stairs as mantics kept slithering in through the hole in the ceiling. "Tristan," Inyani called out. "Hurry, we're closing the door." Clutching his knife tightly, the thief tiptoed around the pack of scavengers being kept at bay by swords and a musket fixed with a bayonet. The noise caught their attention. Unlike the others, he'd not earned their fear by piling up a few corpses. They came at him hard. Waddling forward with deceptive quickness, the mantics moved to cut him off as he broke into a run, and though he leapt over the first that tried to bite his leg, he was caught after he landed. Claws ripped into his trousers, and he hissed in pain, slashing at the creature's eyes. It howled in pain as he ripped through flesh. Releasing him just fast enough, he was able to run to the bottom of the stairs before the rest could do more than nip at his heels. "See, I told you he was too slippery to die," Inyani drawled, idly slashing away at the mantics. It held them back, Tristan saw. It wouldn't have earlier. The saint had been there, and they were gone entirely rabid. Now, they were capable of fear again. "Too slippery to fight, too," Ricardo grunted. That got him contemptuous looks from the remaining 2, Inyani's nephew and the acne-ridden nobleman from Asphodel. Best to nip that in the bud. Still had a use for a decent reputation. "I was looking to see if the saint left anything behind," he lied. "She looks like a spider, so I was concerned of eggs." Ah, and away went the contempt. "Shit," Inyoni's nephew quietly said. "Were they any?" "Couldn't find some, but I can't be sure. I didn't want to risk touching the webbing," Tristan said, feigning reluctance at the confession. "That was wise of you," the Asphodel noble reassured him. "Nothing come of a saint is harmless."
We can all pat ourselves on the back later, Ricardo cut in. Let's close this damn door and bar it shut. We've wasted enough time. Tristan smoothed away his smile. He'd known the Bruesta soldier would be here. See? Every other infant son would have a sword hand already with them. Cosme for the Cerdan brothers, Sonole for the Villazur, finally the Puraduri for Isabel Bruesta. Ricardo was bound to be the one they left behind, and they had to leave someone behind, so it wasn't too obvious they'd abandoned everyone the moment danger arrived. Reputation and honor? Yes. So now he only needed to play his part. How fortunate that Ricardo was such a prick he hadn't even had to bait out an insult. They'll attack when there's fewer of us, Tristan said, like scavengers always do. The last of us will have a fight on their hands. Vignani nodded, about to speak up, when Tristan sniffed. He painted offended pride on his face. Ricardo and I can take the role if he so doubts I can handle a knife, the thief said. There was no argument. None of the others would clamor for the place of danger, and Ricardo couldn't even begin to try wiggling out of this without withdrawing his careless insult from earlier, which the man would not, because he was a prick. And so, as the others began to withdraw up the stairs, Tristan palmed the long needle he had put away earlier. To be safe, he waited until the third time the mantics came after them. He half slipped on the stairs, drawing the scavengers after him eagerly. Even as he scampered back up the stairs in the chaos, he pricked the large man in the fat of the leg. Ricardo yelped and glared down, but Tristan withdrew quick enough that it looked like a mantic had been at fault. The thief scampered up, the two of them keeping the creatures away as the others disappeared up the stairs one by one. Tristan waited. Finster's milk was an extract from a breed of lemures commonly known as Kaltos spinsters, horse-sized scorpions that earned the sobriquet because their venom was not mortal. As if needy spinsters, the beasts instead paralyzed their prey so they could eat them alive, bite by bite. So Ricardo did not die, as that would have been much too suspicious. Instead, he slowed, limbs growing numb, and then made a mistake. When the time came to avoid a snap of teeth, the large soldier misjudged the length of steps, and down Ricardo went, tumbling down the stairs and into the pack of hungry mantics who would conveniently eat the evidence. "Hurry!" Vignani hissed into his ear, dragging him by the shoulder. "He's dead, kid. There's no helping him." The thief made sure to protest once that he could still save his beloved comrade Ricardo before allowing himself to be talked into abandoning him. He was not an amateur, but he did not smile as the door closed behind. 1, Tristan Aberskull counted. And with that, we're going to leave the journey there for now. I hope you found a moment of solace. Thank you for being here, and take care. Till next time.